To the show. My next guest, I know everybody loves to see him, except for the people who send me messages that say, this guy's anti-gay. Scott Bennett, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Yeah. Well, I'm not anti-gay. I'm just pro-marriage. I believe sex and marriage is between a man and a woman, period. The man's body was meant for the woman's body, not a light socket, not a donkey, but a man and a woman, period.
And before we go down that road, I just want to defend your right to that belief and other people's rights to opposing beliefs. What I love about having you on, Scott, is that you do not hold back. You are all over so many of these major issues. You've brought to my attention what was really a stunning statement just yesterday by House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerold Nadler, where he openly admits that there's no support for impeachment or even the probe within his Judiciary Committee. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, you know, these people are, as we've said, they're suffering a mental breakdown. There is no Russia hoax. There's never been a Russia meddling in the election. There's really the deeper crime and conspiracy and coup d'etat that warrants, almost a Nuremberg trial and Mussolini type of punishments is this massive coup d'etat they've tried to orchestrate against the president, utilizing the instruments of national power, the most dangerous instruments of national power. Everything that the American citizen for the last, 200 years has warned against and feared against has actually come true in the Obama administration, attempting to hijack the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Justice, the Director of National Security, the State Department, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the monkeys in uniform at the Pentagon that are not real constitutional officers or enlisted, but just serving their own self-gratification. They've used all those instruments of power to spy on Americans, to gather evidence, to launder intelligence through the British and the Australians, and then get it back to the Americans and fraudulently give it to the FBI, even though the FBI knew it was fraudulent. But they've passed it through these various filters to give it a veneer, a glow of officiality, and then they've put it in front of a FISA court, and then they've gone off and they've busted Paul Manafort for tax issues from years past, or Michael Cohen for taxi cab issues, or Jerome Corsi, and all the list goes on. Roger Stone. And they've surveyed them, they've listened to them, and because they think it's gone through the filters of officiality, that it's okay, this is the America, this is Captain America, we're all Americans together, and it was really a crime, and they've tried. It was almost like a communist takeover of, what was it, 1917 when that happened. They tried violently to take over, and it's all falling short. And the Democrats are losing all credibility. The mainstream media has lost all credibility. They haven't got a leg to stand on. So the only thing they can do is emotionally fall into a tantrum and scream at the top of their lungs, whip themselves, hit themselves on a hammer, spew vomit and pea soup, tear their clothes off, and say, we're not going to take it anymore. He's a liar. And everyone's going, well, you've been screaming that for the last 2 years, but where's the beef? Where's the substance?
Right. Well, let me pause you a second, Scott.
And that's when they're slowly running out of steam and going, well, you know what? Impeachment's not here because the public don't know enough. But when we give them more lies, when we give them more fecal sandwiches, then they're going to be poisoned enough to the point where they'll give us impeachment power. But I think that's a major miscalculation of the American public, the same miscalculation that caused them in the mainstream media to weep and cry like, infants when Trump won and their wicked witch of the North, the green-faced Clinton, fell apart, and the mainstream media couldn't figure it out because
now,
they
underestimated
the American public, and they're doing it again.
I'll pause you a second because you've just coined an interesting phrase as far as I know, and I'm not talking about fecal sandwich, but the filter of officiality. the filter of officiality. So by having Robert Mueller come up there and give his press conference, that's very official. This guy was the head of the FBI. By having Robert Mueller conduct this investigation, there's a big question right now. People want to know, when did Robert Mueller realize that there was not sufficient evidence to conduct this investigation? I mean, certainly someone calls the police and tells them, hey, Scott's got 1 million guns at his house. The police walk in there, they see not a single gun. Do they continue to investigate for months, or do they automatically presume this must have been a false report because there's no evidence of this? Point is, this filter of officiality, that's a very interesting phrase, because we see a lot of people trying to launder information through a filter of officiality. They feel like putting it into court papers, whether it's suing Devin Nunes's cow or threatening people with lawsuits or all these things. That is a filter of officiality, because then people can say, oh, federal civil suit alleges X, Y, and Z. And whether this is happening to the president, I remember back during the election, there was a huge dust-up. Some friend of mine posted on Facebook prior to me starting Crowdsource the Truth that Donald Trump has a rape trial coming up. And this was a federal civil suit that a Jane Doe woman had brought against Donald Trump, allegations going back 20 or 30 years. Now, I'm not making any comment about the truth or falsehood of that allegation because I don't know the details of it, but it's important for people to observe. Anyone can bring any allegation and put it through a filter of officiality and then make comments about those things. So we see that happening all over the place in Congress now.
Yeah, that is entirely their leverage and their power and their threat. Their "sky is falling" slogan is through official channels, making things official. That's why they think, that's why really liberal leftists gravitate to positions of government, because they can do the most heinous, despicable, immoral things under the flag of officiality, and suddenly it becomes the law of the land. Suddenly it becomes, Code of Federal Regulation 10001. What it's really doing, it's undermining the Constitution. It's undermining individual liberties and freedoms and oppressing people. Democrat leftists are about oppression. And you see that every time you watch these people on the news. They're all about getting even, vengeance, reparations. The white heterosexual male is the enemy of everybody, so everybody needs to gang up. Everybody's a victim. And they do everything, whether it's abortion or all these other things. It's all under the guise of giving people freedom, but it's really causing all sorts of misery. And you look at the sanctuary cities, and you look at the homelessness in Los Angeles and Seattle and San Francisco. They've turned these people over. They've broken their families. All of those problems that you see in San Francisco and L.A. are the fruits of liberal leftist thought and action, because you've destroyed these people's families, their mothers and fathers, the marriages at a young age. And I've studied these statistics of these people. Most of them are homeless. They've come from broken homes. They don't have. They've got substance abuse problems or mental abuse as well. They've got total isolation and disconnection, and they're trying to escape from reality because of the misery, because no one's around them. And that's really the liberal leftists turning these people over, saying it's your right to do whatever you want anytime you want, even if you're living in squalor.
Right.
So
now, Scott, I also want people who maybe are joining us for the first time to understand that you're not just a conservative commentator who is spouting off opinions. You are a former U.S. Army psychological operations officer. You've written the book Shell Game, which details, it goes into stunning detail actually, the illegal terrorist financing that is linking UBS, the Clinton Foundation, these intelligence agencies. You've presented this to so many members of Congress who, if they would put 1/10 of the energy into pursuing the allegations and evidence that you present in your book, Shell Game, which people can purchase at shellgamewhistleblower.com, if they would put 1/10 of that energy into looking into these allegations, we might actually be getting somewhere. And you said that this is an emotionally driven situation, but I want to challenge you to think about that for a moment. Are we sure it's just emotional, or are these people in Congress desperately protecting themselves and others from very serious crimes?
Well, they are desperately protecting themselves because their own necks are on the line. This again is a crime that they've tried to orchestrate against the president using national power. This you look at the connect the dots in Spygate. Epoch Times has done a wonderful job. You see the British involved, you see the Australians involved, you see the intelligence officials involved. A lot of this I knew when I was with Brad Birkenfeld going over the WikiLeaks cables and the State Department cables and the documents that clearly showed Hillary Clinton was involved in money laundering and terrorist financing through HSBC, Union Bank of Switzerland, and other international banks that the Saudi Arabians were using in exchange for pay-to-play operations. That's really a crime.
Yeah.
It's coming out, and that's what they're very desperate about, because they know there's a lot of other things that Hillary Clinton, Obama, and the rest of this crew were planning on never being brought to the public light. But since they lost, now it's all being slowly unearthed. And I would say it's also being clumsily unearthed, not to the credit or the not to the credit at all of the Republican Congress or anything like that. But it's being by nature of its revelation, by nature of Barr and Durham and certain elements in Congress slowly pushing this forward after the Mueller report was concluded. We're seeing all of this evidence being brought up. The Democrats are desperate not to let it be brought up. That's why they're spinning it in a different direction. But I think it's going to hang them eventually. I think they're going to lose 2020. I think the media is, of course, most of them have doubled down on trying to make Trump look like a narcissist, a lunatic, and doesn't remember his own name and is
it's
doing
nonstop. They're constantly doing it, even while he's in England. Now, I want to talk about England for a moment, because you mentioned the UK being involved in this spying, and we're talking.
I lost you. I can't get your audio.
You can't hear me. I don't know why that's happening. Let me know when that comes back. Can you hear me? No, can't hear me.
No.
Can you plug in headphones? Do you have headphones?
Okay. Now I hear you. Let me
You were
try.
talking about the UK
that.
and the Five Eyes, the intelligence cooperation. This is something that I think for a lot of people has just become known. I don't know that this is like boldly advertised, that there's an intelligence sharing relationship between all these countries. And even if there is, I don't think they share with us the details of how it actually works in practice versus what they can pitch it to us as. It sounds like we're going to use this to fight terrorism with our allies, but we've seen how that's used to launder intelligence and conduct operations that defy the laws that are intended to protect the rights of American citizens. And I wanted to ask you about something that Michael Moore, the editor of True Pundit, brought up on More Pain, our show that's on every Tuesday nights at 7 on patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. He was talking about this. Now, obviously, this was reported on pretty widely, but again, it doesn't necessarily stick in people's minds. In January 2017, just after the inauguration of Trump, Robert Hannigan, the chief of GCHQ, abruptly resigned. That's very interesting, considering that Christopher Steele came right out of MI6, which is closely related to GCHQ, and a viewer of Crowdsource the Truth brought it to my attention that the Prime Minister of Italy fired top officials from Italian intelligence agencies just 2 or 3 weeks ago. What does all this indicate for the president and the future of this investigation into the investigators?
Well, I think it's showing that this was, as we said, an international intelligence laundering operation with people who were sympathetic to the Obama administration, if not allies, in Italy, in British intelligence, in MI6, including Christopher Steele and including Halpern, who was a FBI informant who was over there. We're seeing all of these plots and behaviors and patterns begin to emerge right out of foreign intelligence. And the most damning one, I think, so far is the Halper, Stephen Halper, who lured Papadopoulos over. Papadopoulos was a sort of a neocon energy guy. He was a Bush junior supporter, and he was over doing energy analysis for Israel and things like that. And he was lured by Halper to come to England and to sit down with him. And Halper had some girl who was some buxom, good-looking, some tease.
You're talking about
her name was Azra something, Azra Turk or something. Anyway,
are you talking about
Papadopoulos there? And then he starts questioning him about Hillary's emails or Russian intelligence this, and he's recording Papadopoulos, and Papadopoulos is like a deer in the headlights and says, "Well,
Scott, can you hear me? And this, can you hear me? Can't hear me.
No, I can't.
Do you have headphones there? I don't know why the sound is going out.
Let me.
Can you hear me, Scott?
Okay, let me switch down. I'll be right back.
Okay, no problem. Switch out, because I want to talk to you some more about Stefan Halper. We'll figure out what's going on there with Scott. Well, it's very difficult to have guests from all over the country with their own tech set up at their locations. You never know what's going to work and what's not going to work. Scott is giving us some really great commentary. I want to dig into some of these questions about Stefan Halper and this Cambridge academic, Svetlana Lakova, who is suing him. We'll hopefully get Scott back on the line with his audio.
Yeah, I got you now.
Great.
We've been hacked and cyber attacked for the past few days in amazing ways. So this may be part of that.
There's been a lot of stuff going on with YouTube, and there was an attack on the chat section of Sunday with Charles on Sunday, but we'll catch up with that later. I want to ask you about Stefan Halper. We've got this lawsuit from a person who is being described in the Daily Caller as a Cambridge academic. That's Svetlana Lakova. She's suing Halper in a lawsuit written by Stephen S. Biss, the same lawyer who is representing Robert David Steele in a vexatious lawsuit against me, which I have called a fake lawsuit from a real idiot, because I believe the lawsuit is based on fraudulent accusations, and you'd have to be an idiot to do that. But Svetlana Lakova, her lawsuit refers to Stephen Halper as a rat effer. Have you seen this lawsuit, Scott?
Well, I'm hearing you a little bit faded and stuff, but I'll comment as best I can. I think Halper is going to be increasingly exposed, and the people who he's worked with are going to be exposed. That's why you've had the firings at Italy. That's why you've had the UK intelligence guy leave. Trump and his Department of Justice investigation into this is going to be revealing how all of these people played a part, again, in the laundering of intelligence through the UK, through the Australians, back up to Brennan. And Brennan did this all. He will really be the one to be fired for abuse of his position and abuse of the intelligence community apparatus, because he purposely went out of his way to plant these seeds, to launder them, and then get the material back and then give it to the FBI. The FBI then used this for their FISA court operations against Carter Page and all the rest of them. And they were trying to throw a net over all of the Trump people, and I think it's come apart at the seams. The net's fallen apart. Jerome Corsi probably was the first man to really cut through it. Flynn could have cut through it, I think, but for whatever reason,
well, he was represented by Covington and Burling. Flynn was roped in early and hooked into a law firm that I don't think has his best interests at heart.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. The voice
well,
lost.
I'm saying that it's true that General Flynn may have had an opportunity to challenge the Mueller investigation in the way that Dr. Corsi did, but I think that the people that did not want him to do that were aware of that and somehow convinced him to be represented.
Let me try it one more time. I'm gonna reconnect.
Sure. Somehow convinced the doctor, sorry, not the doctor, but rather, what I'm getting at is, it feels to me like somehow General Flynn was convinced by someone to be represented by Covington and Burling, which of course... Okay, have we got you, Scott? Can you hear me? You can't hear me. So I'm not really sure what's going on, but it definitely hurts our ability to conduct this interview if you can't hear me. Not sure what we should do about that. Let me try switching something here, and maybe that'll help.
No, it seems like they're jamming us on your end.
Hang on 1 second. We'll try one quick thing here. If I can change this. How about now, Scott? Can you hear me now?
Hello? I can hear you now.
You can. Okay. So perhaps that was, I don't know, something with the microphone here I'll have to take a look at. But what I was saying is, I do believe that General Flynn could have challenged Robert Mueller's investigation in the way that Dr. Corsi did. However, I think that early on, this move was anticipated, and the general was maneuvered in a way that caused him to select Covington and Burling as his lawyers to make sure that he would not do that. And see, the concern that I have, Scott, is we've spoken on this channel quite a bit about lawfare. And we know that things are not always as they appear. You are an expert in psychological operations. You're the author of the book Shell Game. You're well aware that when things are boldly presented and trying to convince people, oh yeah, get behind this, we definitely want to be, you know, this lawsuit here where Daily Caller describes Svetlana Lakova as a Cambridge academic suing Stefan Halper. I mean, have you seen this lawsuit written by Stephen S. Biss, the same attorney who's representing?
No, I haven't. I've heard her. I believe she was identified and said some words about it, but I haven't read about the Biss guy or the lawsuit itself.
Right. Biss is in the regular practice of bringing these lawsuits that I believe are not what they appear to be. So I'm very curious to know what's going on between Stefan Halper, Svetlana Lakova, George Papadopoulos, and this whole thing. But it seems possible that one of the goals of these lawsuits is to simply obfuscate the facts, as you said, put them through a filter of officiality. So now this is a lawsuit, and Daily Caller reports on the lawsuit. They have not come to a conclusion as to whether the allegations in the lawsuit or the statements made in the lawsuit are true or not. And the average person reads this and says, oh, there's a lawsuit, and they think that's tantamount to an indictment. Mm-hmm. Same thing Mueller was doing, by the way.
Yeah, there's a lot of smoke. They've generated a lot of noise, a lot of smoke, and that's always the countermeasure. And that's a sign, in the sense that you're right over the target. The flak is the worst at that point. So the evidence of wrongdoing on behalf of the agents that were working against Trump is now increasingly becoming made public. And the question is, too, what is the president, commander-in-chief, doing about it? Well, he's got Brennan, he's got Durham. I'm not Brennan. He's got Barr, he's got Durham, the inspector general. All of that is going to be revealing Eric Holder. I think you'll see in the next, before 2020, I think for the next year, by next June, July, you're going to have a lot of these people already committed to plea deals or in prison or under trial. And if everyone that I knew about in my report that Brad Birkenfeld and I submitted, everybody in that report, if they're going to be named in these counter strikes, John Brennan is one, of course Hillary Clinton, the Attorney General Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, Loretta Lynch, members of the Covington and Burling law firm, Roger Zakheim, Stuart Eisenstadt,
Dov
Zakheim, Ginny Rhee will be. These people will be disbarred, and I think they're moving in that way right now. They're talking about disbarring Mueller.
Who's talking about that? That's a good conversation.
Yeah, Mueller.
Who's brought that up?
It was, I think it was an official person in Congress or so. It was on Tucker Carlson or Hannity or something, but someone high up was talking about these people need to be disbarred
Yeah.
because they violated the FISA warrant process. They committed fraud on the court. Hannity had a good word. He said it was uh, it was first degree fraud on the court. It was purposeful, premeditated fraud on the court. And
Right.
all of this was premeditated. All of this was calculated. It was analyzed. The Podesta team behind Clinton, had a meeting with, over a 24-hour period talking about inventing this Russian collusion hoax, because the Russians are the easiest and fastest and best way to create a boogeyman. Look, the Russians did this. The Russians are coming. The Russians own Trump. The Russians have video of Trump with little girls or whatever. The Russians are doing all this. And most of the people said, who, what, where? The Russians? Didn't we beat them? Oh, I guess we didn't. What did they do? And that infection, that fever took over. But the fever has subsided. And there are some very interesting organic principles of political homeostasis and philosophical homeostasis. And that is, people may be deluded or infected for a while, but then the calm of life and the enjoyments of things and the busyness of work and the requirements of family and children or parents, all of that presses down and levels all of the hysteria and excitement that most of these liberal leftists force, because people have more weighty things to attend to. So they all of that kind of dissipates. The only ones it doesn't dissipate on are those who live and thrive off of that fever, like political parasites, and those are usually the far left, cause-oriented, rainbow flag waving, Starbucks multiple piercing, tattooed, schizophrenics, full of drugs or full of whatever, anger and venom, or the sky is falling, Ocasio-Cortez. They're usually not married, usually don't have children, so they don't have those stabilization factors. So that makes them by nature unstable.
Let me bring you back to the disbar comment. Sorry, Scott. I think it was Joe DeGeneres might have said it on Lou Dobbs.
Probably.
So that's a really important statement right there. I also want to remind people, Scott, they can follow you on Twitter. You are there at Army PsyOps, so it might be a little difficult to find Scott if you don't know that Twitter handle. Make sure you're following Scott on Twitter. He's tweeting stuff out, and Scott's been banned from some social media platforms. That has been happening a lot. So if you're watching us right now and you don't follow Crowdsource the Truth, please follow me at CS the Truth on Twitter and stay in touch, because there's been a lot of demonetization going on. It's, this calculated fraud on the court. I think we're seeing a lot of this happen. It's the same playbook that they use. They knew they didn't have any evidence of prostitutes urinating on a bed. If you were conducting an investigation and someone at a hotel told you, oh, prostitutes urinated on a bed, in my view, the first thing you'd do is you'd go to the hotel, you'd look for security cameras, you'd look for pictures of those prostitutes, you'd find them, you'd depose them, you'd get all this evidence and all this information, and you say, we have firsthand testimony from two women. Here they are on the camera coming into the hotel. They said it was Donald Trump. Here's Trump in the hotel registry. This is like a story made up by somebody in the 5th grade, and it's gone all the way to the Congress, gone all the way to a special counsel. I mean, this is literally like spending $30 million or whatever it is investigating, did the tooth fairy take away a 5-year-old person's tooth? And they've done it. They've actually done it.
Yeah. In one regard, it's a play on the stupidity of people and the outrage of people. But then it's also a play on their own stupidity, because the majority of the people will be turned off by that
but
that
wait,
deception.
let's not dismiss it. Let's not dismiss it as stupidity, Scott, because this actually is a very sophisticated psychological operation, isn't it?
Yeah,
We're all here being subjected to the toxins in the environment from Monsanto, things like glyphosate, processed food at McDonald's and supermarkets, and all this stuff that so many people eat. Our brains are part of our bodies. Our bodies are made up of what we ingest. We've got fluoride and chlorine and bromine and pharmaceutical runoff in the drinking water. And we've got everybody who, we've had guests on this show who have spoken about the deliberate dumbing down of America. And I agree with your assessment that they're trying to make it emotional for the people of the United States. But the people like Jerold Nadler and Nancy Pelosi, who are getting on television and spouting this nonsense, I don't think they're emotional about it. I think they are socially engineering the American people, and this is such a pervasive problem. It's absolutely ridiculous. I want to switch gears for a second.
Let me just say one thing. Let me just say one thing. Candace Owens, when she responded, I believe it was to Nadler, that's how everybody needs to respond to this, with moral outrage that is overwhelming to the attacker. Because if you notice, when they tried to shut down Candace Owens, that one time she was in front of Congress, she was giving testimony like the other people, and I think it was a hearing on white right-wing supremacists or something like that. And Candace Owens, who's a wonderful speaker, I think she's fabulous. I'd love to see her in a higher echelon of the Trump administration. But she goes and she testifies as a Democrat, as a black female, and she says something to the effect
of... No, she's not a Democrat. She said she used to be a Democrat.
Okay, maybe. I'll stand corrected. I can't remember saying that, but when she was at the hearing, and I think it was Nadler who hit his gavel and tried to shut her down and say, you can't say this. And she said, I didn't say that. You're not listening to me. What I said was this, and he didn't respond. Her counterattack, her overwhelming, in-your-face conviction, steely-eyed, drill right into them. That's how everybody needs to respond to these Nadler people, to the Pelosi's, because that's the only thing they understand is overwhelming power and aggression and moral outrage to their lie. You catch them on it. She did. And Nadler and these people are not going to stop, but that's the only way for people really to combat it, is to say that's a lie, that's completely false, the facts are not on your side, and you should be disbarred, you should be kicked out of Congress because you're violating the Constitution of the United States. That's what you see them hiding behind now. They are saying, we have an oath, we took an oath to the Constitution. So they're trying to make it official. They're trying to make it sound like they're doing their Star-Spangled Yankee Doodle Dandy service, like Booker and these other guys on CNN and MSNBC. They're constantly saying we have an oath to the Constitution and we're doing this. It's all going to fall flat, and it's going to dissipate. So there's another thing I wanted to read to you, was the letter that Senator Dick Black...
That's what I wanted to shift to, yes. And I just want to tell you right now, Scott, Sherry is saying, Scott, you're awesome. Mitchell says Nadler's eyebrows want to impeach him. So we've got a lot of good commentary coming in. Now, that's what I wanted to shift to. Everybody knows that you have a great relationship with Senator Dick Black. And the senator, he's a state senator from Virginia. You've told us how Andrew McCabe attempted to set him up, probably to be killed in Syria. In a meeting with terrorists. This is something that really requires real investigation, not the preschool weeble wobble nonsense investigation that we've seen from the criminal Robert Mueller. But Senator Dick Black has just penned a letter to the president. Why don't you tell us about what this letter is all about, Scott?
Well, yesterday I had an interview with him. I was supposed to have it last week, and this week we were able to do it. And he said to me for the third time the story about McCabe, and this is very important for people to hear, Jason, because they're never going to hear this anywhere else but right here, right now on your show. And Senator Dick Black told me, and I've got the transcript and I've got the radio link, and I'm going to put it up on the internet. But he said, Scott. Because I said, well, Senator, let's talk about McCabe and all of the deep state Spygate stuff that's imploding. And I said, you had experience with McCabe when he sent 4 FBI agents. And he said, yeah. And he says, one more time, here's what happened. He said, quote, somewhat to the effect of, let me summarize, quote, Terry McAuliffe and Hillary Clinton had organized for Andrew McCabe to have his wife, Jill McCabe, although you can guesstimate why and how, but to have Jill McCabe suddenly come in and replace the Democrat candidate who was running against Senator Black, that candidate was suddenly thrown out, and Jill McCabe was brought in and given enormous amounts of money. They outspent Senator Black like 6 times, and
It's a state Senate race, so people don't spend as much on those elections as they do in national races.
They certainly don't. So the next thing that happens, she's ushered in to run against Senator Dick Black, and then Andrew McCabe sends 4 FBI agents, 2 from Miami, and I think 2 from New York or something. And they met with Senator Black, and they said, "We'd like you to go over to Syria. There's some people that have been imprisoned. We want," and he said, "I'm happy to go talk to anybody, but if they're terrorists, I won't talk to them. If they've been, beheading people and doing bad stuff, I'm going to have nothing to do with getting them out of jail. They can rot in hell," because he knew that the U.S. and the CIA and Brennan and Clinton and Obama were backing the Saudi Arabian Wahhabists to go up into Syria and destabilize. So he said, "I'm not going to go over and help get."
Because he knew exactly what they had done in Libya, and it was a replay of the same thing. We should also remind everybody, I'm sure most of the viewers of Crowdsource the Truth remember this, but Andrew McCabe also violated the Hatch Act by wearing this T-shirt and campaigning with his wife while she was running. Employees of the FBI are not allowed to express any political bias whatsoever. Robin Gritz has told us how Andrew McCabe used his FBI email to promote this campaign for his wife. He's here wearing a Vote for Dr. Jill McCabe shirt, obviously at a campaign event. It's been reported in TruePundit.com that he received over $1.2 million for this campaign. We don't know where that money went. Terry McAuliffe, basically very closely connected to the Clintons, and I think everybody knows there's been a lot of financial shenanigans that have gone on there. There's been rumors that Terry McAuliffe is going to run for president, possibly in 2024. Well, this is an evil man, isn't it, Scott?
Very much so, be evil. Terry McAuliffe basically told Andrew McCabe, we'll back and finance your wife. And Andrew McCabe was in the position of reviewing the Hillary Clinton email server case. And all of the missing emails and all of the intelligence. And remember, I told you the story. Intelligence is anything that's classified as intelligence, secret, top secret, TSSEI, has to go through channels of courier carrying or communication on separate computer systems, double wrapped, always under basically armed courier guard. I was a courier. I was always armed when I carried documents and materials. And Hillary Clinton, by nature of what she did, automatically violated the handling of the mishandling. She committed mishandling of intelligence materials, and she should be automatically prosecuted because she had on her computer systems information that had been classified.
And it's amazing that that's been a question or a debate in anybody's mind. I mean, this is such an egregious violation.
Well, they said intent. See, that's what what Comey and McCabe and all of them did, was they inserted the word intent.
Well, they're changing the law. They're changing the law in the same way that Mueller did. There's no circumstance where the police accuse you of something and now the burden is on the police to prove that you didn't do something. You are automatically presumed to have not done it. There's this picture of Andrew McCabe that came out in February. He looks like he's losing weight to me, Scott. He looks pretty slight in this picture, perhaps under the pressure of knowing that these crimes are coming home to roost, and he may soon face justice, particularly if the big fish skate. He is the low-hanging fruit. He is one of the most likely guys to face prosecution and maybe incarceration.
Yeah, that's right. They could easily charge him with, they could charge him with the entire alphabet if they wanted to. And he knows that. He knows how they operate. And they could say, look, you know how it works. We're going to charge you with 50 crimes and make you 200 years in prison. Or you can take a plea deal and be out in 5 or 10. And you have to say what happened. And he'll basically say, Hillary Clinton and Terry McAuliffe told me my wife would be running for office and win the election, and all I had to do was lure Dick Black over to Syria, and then we could tar him with a terrorist stick. He's talking to terrorists if he didn't get killed first. So if we don't get him killed, we'll tar him and he'll lose the election. That was his agenda. Dick Black didn't fall for it, but these guys are gonna fall for it. And I've got the letter if you want me to read it.
Yeah, I was showing the letter. We can definitely go through that. Before we do, though, I definitely want people to be aware that they're going to be able to see this interview that Scott conducted with Senator Black. It's going to be up on his Patreon channel. People can get there by going to patreon.com/shellgame. It is super important that people get onto Patreon and sponsor Scott. I hope that people will also get onto patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, because just yesterday YouTube has announced that they are now going to be banning sites that engage in hate speech. Now, the funny thing about that is nobody likes hate, but when it comes to freedom of speech, you can't eliminate hate speech. Hate speech is part of freedom of speech. You know, Nazis, right, KKK, Muslim Brotherhood, ADL, whoever, they all have the right to state their opinions. If you don't like it, or it makes you uncomfortable, or you feel it's hateful, well, too bad. You cannot eliminate half of an equation and keep the rest of the equation intact. We need to challenge hate speech. We need to shun hate speech as consumers of content. But what's happening now with YouTube is extremely dangerous, and I can tell that Scott is agreeing with me, because they're shutting down people's rights to free speech. This is how they control it. They control the advertising, they control the monetization, and that allows them to shut out voices that they don't want to have heard. So it's important that everybody watching this broadcast right now, if you want to have the right to hear what Scott has to say, what I have to say, to view and to state your own opinions, please get onto patreon.com/shellgame and sponsor Scott. He'll have his interview with Senator Dick Black on there later today, and people should also be going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Scott, please read this letter that Senator Black has sent to the president.
Well, he sent this to the President, Donald Trump, on May 22nd, 2019, and it reads, "Dear Mr. President, I served as a colonel in the office of the Judge Advocate General at the Pentagon and once exercised military justice authority over the Middle East and North Africa. Also, as a Marine officer, I was wounded during fierce fighting in Vietnam. It is from those perspectives that I write this letter. I find the constant saber rattling and efforts to ignite a war against Iran deeply troubling. I voted for you, but I did not elect John Bolton. I was alarmed when you chose him as the National Security Advisor, since he was a key architect of our regime change war in Iraq. I opposed the war against Iran. The notion that Iran intends to attack the U.S. is utterly absurd. I was dismayed that John Bolton convened your cabinet secretaries and key advisors at CIA headquarters, apparently to devise a pretext for war. Suddenly, Department of Defense, which balked at sending 5,000 troops to defend our own borders, had earmarked 120,000 troops to attack the Iranian people. John Bolton has usurped your authority as commander-in-chief. He countermanded your order for an immediate withdrawal from Syria, and now he has alarmed our allies by agitating for war against Iran. It was reported that you hope to avoid war with Iran, but the CINC does not hope. He commands. He does not delegate war-making to his staff. Saudi Arabia has called on Americans to attack Iran and on their behalf, but I neither serve nor respect Saudi Arabia. Recently, the Crown Prince reportedly dispatched a team of assassins who tortured, suffocated, and dismembered Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Now, wait a minute. Why does the senator think Jamal Khashoggi is a journalist? I agree with everything he's said so far.
Because he worked for Washington Post or wrote columns or stories for the Washington Post. We need to educate
the senator about what that guy was really about. And I don't mean to interrupt your reading there, Scott, but as you started reading this live stream has once again come under attack. There are many, many sock puppet accounts in the chat right now putting pornography links in there, and it is overwhelming the chat to the extent that I can't even block these people. It's possible that our live stream will be killed. This looks like the same exact attack tactic that was used against Charles Ortel's show on Sunday. So congratulations, Scott. We've been elevated to the level of directed denial of service attacks on the chat. Let's see what this does to the stream. But please keep reading, because at very least we'll have this recorded and uploaded later.
Continuing, he writes, last month, Saudi Arabia beheaded 37 men, mostly minority Shiites, in a mass execution. And just last week, in the capital of Riyadh, a Filipino woman was tied to a tree in the blazing sun as punishment for a trivial housekeeping mistake. Saudis treat women like dogs. 9 women who encouraged the government to allow women to drive were imprisoned and tortured for doing so. No Iranian, and to my knowledge, no Shia Muslim, has ever committed a terror act on American soil. It is Saudi Arabia, with its violent Wahhabi religious cult, that is the principal instigator of global terror. Wahhabi religious tenets undergird every major terror attack on the United States since 9/11. It was Saudis, not Iranians, who dispatched 19 al-Qaeda terrorists to crash jets into the Pentagon and Twin Towers on 9/11. I do not want more Americans dying for Saudi Arabia. 3,000 already paid that price on 9/11. We must not shed more blood to advance the foreign policy of the brutal Saudi dictatorship. You campaigned on ending wars of regime change, and I supported you for that and other reasons. However, John Bolton and Mike Pompeo are orchestrating a new conflict that could easily kill 1 million Iranians, leaving that country in poverty and chaos. We have already spread death and destruction across the Middle East and North Africa, and we have killed or maimed tens of thousands of courageous American troops while doing so. This pointless bloodshed must stop. America elected you to end wars of regime change and to lower tensions. Our nation is war weary. There is no public support for a war against Iran. I am concerned that the Republican Party will suffer historical electoral losses in 2020 if we launch an attack on Iran. I support you and I want you to succeed. Please do not abandon your solemn commitment to America. Very warm regards, Richard H. Black, Senator of Virginia, 13th District, and he copied this to all members of the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. And I concur with that letter.
I really wish Senator Black would run as a Democrat in 2020. He's one of the most sensible guys in government. And unfortunately, I don't know where he's getting his information about Jamal Khashoggi, but people are giving me all kinds of suggestions as far as how I should deal with this chat attack. I don't know if you can see this, Scott, but I've been doing my best to delete some of these chatters who are putting in foreign languages and emojis and...
Well, see, they don't like the idea that Iran is being revealed as a non-threat to the United States. Who wants us to attack Iran? The Israeli Mossad, the Saudi Arabians, both, the military-industrial complex, those who profit from war and chaos and bloodshed, those who want Iranians dispersed in a diaspora up into Europe and Turkey and elsewhere. All of these things are damaging and chaotic and not in the interest of the American people. But you see it very clearly that there are some parties that are obsessed with pushing this war. And the Democrats, of course, would impeach Trump for doing so. They may be getting behind it, but it's a trap. It would be a trap for the president. And Dick Black, I've said this, and I think he's positioning himself when he leaves the Senate in December. I would love to see him as National Security Advisor or Secretary of State or Department of Defense. He would be a great Department of Defense Secretary because, you know, Jason, John Bolton never served in the military. He was a draft dodger.
And he's making these wars all over the place.
And he's making these wars. And Dick Cheney never went to Vietnam. He was never in the military. Arrogantly, Dick Cheney said, I had better things to do. That's also in Senator Black's interview. He knows these men, and he despises them because they were draft dodgers. They refused to go into the military. He went to Vietnam. He was wounded. He was a helicopter pilot. He's also revered and admired by Press TV, RT, Sputnik, you know, Russia, Turkey. He's met Assad. So he's the best ambassador for the president in that whole region to help him walk back at this tar pit that Pompeo and Haspel and Bolton have put the president in. And one other thing, remember we talked about this several weeks ago, I think it was, the rainbow flag that appeared under the Venezuela embassy.
Right.
And I had all sorts of problems with that because I thought that is not the Republican Party's agenda. You will lose much of your base if you give them the perception that you're all about.
It's also not the flag of the United States. It shouldn't be on a U.S. embassy.
But somebody put out a Twitter message on President Trump's Twitter that said, "I'm initiating a global initiative to legalize or decriminalize homosexuality or gay laws." And it's been told to me that President Trump did not send that. He has got a team of traitors inside the White House that are commandeering his Twitter and doing that sort of thing.
Well, I agree with that, though. I like the idea of putting pressure on countries that would kill people for being homosexual. It's certainly someone's right to disagree with it as a lifestyle, but criminalizing it I do not agree with. And countries like Saudi Arabia that openly embrace that, incidentally, in a very contradictory manner, given the things that we've heard about jockey boys and the abuse of young boys. If you're a man abusing a boy, not only is it pedophilia, it's homosexuality. And so I find it strange that a country would engage in that type of behavior, but then kill other people for being homosexual. So that's interesting that it was apparently not Trump who put that out. I think we've got this, oh man, the second I say that, the chat attack comes back.
Well, then we also have Russia and China. That's the other big development that's kind of coming together, is you see Russia and China having a closer political bond. You see China going up there calling Putin his best friend, saying, "I've been to Russia more times than ever before," and Putin saying the same thing. So you see Putin and China really bonding closely in almost a mutual defense pact. And that translates into, okay, how is Trump going to now balance that? He's essentially, you're outmanned. If you have Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, and much of Europe against the United States, and I think the Europeans are moving in that direction because they don't like the clamorings of war. They don't like sanctions against Russia. They don't like that they're being forced or threatened to be forced with buying natural gas from the United States instead of Russia. All of those things have a stench of bullying and oppression and, it's my way or the highway. They also don't necessarily agree with the Venezuelan coup. That was another major failure, I think. There's nothing good that happened there. Although I'm not a socialist at all, but I don't like these sort of half-baked measures because
it's another John Bolton plan, isn't it?
It's exactly what it is. John Bolton, and the sooner Trump fires Bolton, gets rid of him, gets rid of Pompeo, has a new varsity team come on the football field, the better and safer he'll be for 2020. He has to do it so that he has a new team in place that he can, ride to the election in 2020 on horses of great success. And he needs a new team to do that because Bolton and Pompeo, he may have put them in to be saber rattlers, but that's all they can do. They have no charm. They have no charisma. They have no yield or flexibility. So he's got to get rid of them soon and bring in new people that can build upon the threat or the animosity that they've generated, and maybe do the good cop, bad cop thing. Bolton and Pompeo have been the bad cops. Now he needs good cops to come in and say, "Hey, let's make a deal. Let's make this." The next 4 years, very, very prosperous.
Yeah. Now, Scott, I don't mean to push us in the direction of a far-flung QAnon-type conspiracy theory, but to what extent do you think Donald Trump might be bringing people like John Bolton into his cabinet to sort of air them out publicly? And certainly if Trump fires him, that knocks Bolton out of action for hopefully the next 6 years.
Well, he could do that, but I think it's so bad. The optics have been bad. Bolton, I mean, he's the position they put Trump in now, I think, is the worst position he's been in since he came into the presidency.
Why do you say that? People think he's in a good position. The Mueller investigation is over. He's in England.
that the domestic policy side is fine. Everybody likes the idea of building a wall. Everybody likes the idea of keeping out hundreds of thousands of migrants. Everybody hates the
Apparently not the
liberal
Democrats.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's their future voter base, is they want to bring in all the migrants and flood the country, and then suddenly they have a tyranny of the majority by getting rid of the electoral college. But on a domestic policy level, the president is absolutely winning the day. It is the foreign policy, and has always been the foreign policy that concerned me, because one bad war, one ship that sunk, that triggers an American reaction, suddenly you have World War I all over again. And suddenly you have the majority of the people saying, I'm not going to vote for him because he started another war, and he said he wouldn't.
But didn't he just the other day say he doesn't want a war with Iran? A lot of people were saying this seems like Trump is contradicting Bolton.
Well, he said that, and I don't think he does want a war. I think he adamantly, passionately does not want a war, does not. That's why he's not sent an aircraft carrier into the Strait of Hormuz. He's kept ships out of there. I think there's a deep state in Iran. Always remember that. There's a deep state in Iran that want this sort of chaos. Zarif, who is the foreign minister, tried to block my visa and others from coming into Iran. It was the religious leader of Iran that granted us our visas. He overrode Zarif. He overrode Rouhani, and the religious leader, Khomeini, allowed myself, Phil Giraldi, Michael Maloof, Peter Van Buren, J. Michael Springman, Kevin Barrett, Jim Dean, a whole bunch of people from Veterans Today and other Americans come over to Iran and give presentations and talk to students. That was not wanted by Zarif. And Zarif has also been in communication with Dianne Feinstein. There's a whole now story coming out that Dianne Feinstein was communicating, may have violated the Logan Act by doing that. So there's some internal struggles with Iran, but I think Trump recognizes that. I think they know Trump does not want to go to a war, and Iran is ready to turn. That was the other thing Dick Black said. He said, Scott, Iran has the fastest rate of conversions than any other country. You have more conversions.
What do you mean?
To Christianity or outside of the traditional Muslim identity.
Got it.
You have more conversions in Iran than anywhere else. I haven't done the math and stuff like that.
But you've said something very important, Scott. You said there's a deep state in Iran, and frankly, it seems to me there's a deep state in every country: the United States, Iran, Israel, the United Kingdom. There's a deep state everywhere. I mean, basically, that's what the deep state sort of is. It's this supranational government that defies elections, defies the will of the people, whatever country they're in. I mean, certainly Andrew McCabe, nobody elected him, and he was trying to overthrow the president. It's just, I think to our viewers and to you and I, this type of stuff is just so clear. It's hard to see how people are buying any of the nonsense in the mainstream news. And I mean, it just reminds me how important it is for our viewers to go to patreon.com/shellgame and sponsor Scott, as well as going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Scott, one of the reasons I started the Crowdsource the Truth Patreon and Subscribestar channels is because it is so easy for people who want to keep this information from coming forward to come in here with stupid chat bots and slam the chat, distract us, redirect the conversation, prevent thinking people who want this information, who want to interact with you and I. It's so base level. It's like fighting children. It's unbelievable.
Yes. Well, I think the country is in a civil war. I think the smart people are, of course, going to win, because the lunatics and the fascists and those who try and suppress truth and information are just coming apart at the seams. The whole Antifa thing. But we have to be prepared.
Someone says, Matt says Flynn just fired his attorneys. I better check that.
Yeah, because you remember, Jason, when you and I were together in Dallas, we had a conversation with many other people, and one of them was Michael Flynn's brother.
Yes.
And I said to his brother, look, Covington and Burling is a bad firm. You've got to tell your brother that these guys are totally involved with the Hillary Clinton terrorist financing cover-up at the State Department, Department of Justice. Covington and Burling employed Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer before, and they were all responsible for this. So
this is huge, Scott. It's confirmed. We've got it in the Hill, we've got it in Politico, we've got it in the Washington Examiner. Boy, I sure hope some of the conversations we had with Joe Flynn and some of the public broadcasts that we've done exposing Covington and Burling and talking to the Flynn family, asking them. I mean, look, this is a family that was put under tremendous pressure. And I mean, Scott, this goes right to what I've been...
His son. They threatened his son. They were going to go after his son.
They did it in open court. They threatened his son. It was not hard to tell. It was so obvious. But this is exactly what I'm talking about with lawfare. Bullies like Robert Mueller, I should say bullies and cowards like Robert Mueller, like Stephen S. Biss, like Lanny Brewer, like David Shalala, all of these cowards. Do people realize that part of the reason that lawyers who are unethical act so brazenly like this is because lawyers enjoy immunity from the types of things that non-lawyers could be jammed up with federal crimes, 18 U.S.C. 1001. Lawyers have immunity against these things when they're acting in their capacity as lawyers and carrying out these types of cases. You can't necessarily bring charges against them for some of these things, so they can be brazen in their violations of the law. I am so pleased that General Flynn has fired his attorneys. I really want people to go and visit the MikeFlynnDefenseFund.org. The Flynn family really needs our support. I have not met General Flynn, but I've communicated with him, and I've obviously met his brother Joe, with you, Scott. Really just fine people, fine patriots. This is a family of individuals who have sacrificed their lives in defense of this country, carrying out their duty as military officers. And like you, Scott, these guys have been getting the shaft. These are the honest people within our organizations who need to be brave in the way that Scott has, in the way that General Flynn has, and come forward to fight this corruption, not cowards who are sticking stupid pornographic advertisements into the chat, not cowards who are bringing fake lawsuits against me, against Devin Nunes's cow, against, I don't like Stefan Halper, but there's something up with that Svetlana Lakova lawsuit. This has got to come to an end, Scott, and it's critically important that people allow this information to remain available by becoming sponsors both of Scott and myself. I think we are rapidly heading towards a world where this notion that all of my video content is going to be free because it's paid for by advertising, that is going away. That is a mechanism of control. These advertisers are multi-billion-dollar corporations that have boards of directors that are infiltrated by these evil people who can steer them in directions that prevent you, the viewers, from getting this type of critically important information that hopefully, we can't confirm this, but hopefully that helped the Flynn family make the proper decision in getting away from Covington and Burling ahead of this sentencing and getting a proper lawyer who will have the general's best interests in heart, who will adhere to the law. And this is a huge development, Scott. I'm really pleased.
We said this before, Jason. We can talk about it more next week, but I wouldn't be surprised if every charge against Flynn is thrown out. That's what a real lawyer would do.
Yes.
Come in and say everything is thrown out, and this firm that represented Mr. Flynn should be investigated because they had a role in this whole operation. Covington and Burling had conflicts of interest, and they were participating in this. And that's the reason all of this is thrown out. That's the reason that this could hit a whole new level of counterattack, starting with Covington and Burling and Flynn coming out saying they lied to me, they misrepresented me, they were actually up to their neck in all of this, and I discovered it finally. And Dick Black knows Flynn personally, and he's talked about this. And I think Dick Black, again, knows that all of this is going to be turning, and we're going to see, I think, hopefully the White House really respond with a lot tougher prosecutions of these people. So this is good news.
Absolutely, very good news. This is the best news I've heard in a while, and of course our viewers will recall that Eric Holder is a partner in Covington and Burling, so some of Barack Obama's allies should be booking their plane tickets to Brazil right now, because otherwise they're going to be spending a pretty extended vacation at Club Fed if justice is actually served. Scott, this has really got to bring a smile to your face to know that we're at least going in the proper direction, that hopefully justice will be served. Someone's telling me about censorship here. It's hard to read the comments, speak extemporaneously, and keep all of these things going. But Scott, we're just about out of time here. I'm so pleased that we can end on a positive note like that. I'm also pleased, I would like to somehow know if this decision was at all affected by the information that you've brought to light, the information this show has brought to light. I really must urge people to go and visit patreon.com/shellgame and support Scott. The work that he's doing is so important. Whistleblowers like Scott are being deliberately blocked from having traditional jobs, from publishing books about this information through traditional methods, because they don't want you to learn about Covington and Burling. They don't want you to learn about the illegal terrorist financing that Scott reveals in his breakthrough book, Shell Game, that you can purchase at shellgamewhistleblower.com. And I'm not just advertising this stuff. I think it's important that our viewers know the facts of what is in here. And if you disagree with what is in here, that's equally important for you to know. We want an educated and informed public, and it's important that people realize that this advertiser-driven model for news does not work. We're seeing it disintegrate before our eyes. So please get onto patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and patreon.com/shellgame. Scott, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. This is amazing real-time good news coming into us while we're here. We'll speak to you again next week.
Thank you, Jason. God bless you. You're doing a great job, pal.
Thank you, Scott. You too. Take care. And thanks, everybody, for watching.